He had practiced his greeting at least a dozen times that morning, in the mirror, on the bus, even quietly under his breath as he tied his apron behind his back. Hello, my name is Sam, and I'll be your server today. It wasn't perfect, but it was his, and for someone like Sam, who lived with a stutter that had haunted him since childhood, every syllable was a victory. What he didn't know was that today, in a small, tucked-away corner booth of a bustling American diner, his biggest fear was about to come true, in front of a group of strangers with nothing but cruelty on their minds. But what came next? No one, not even the ones who laughed the loudest, saw that coming. And when the truth finally came out, the entire internet lit up with shock, rage, and something no one expected: admiration. Before we dive deeper, let me just say this. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or straight up disrespected for something you can't control, this story is going to hit you hard. And if you're here just wondering why this random waiter became a viral headline practically overnight, trust me, the answer is even better than you think. You're not just going to get the answer, you're going to feel it. I promise by the end of this video, you'll remember exactly why you clicked and you'll walk away with something more than just another internet story. But you've got to stick with me till the very end. Not because I said so, but because Sam deserves to be heard. Every last word. Now, I get it. You've got 100 tabs open. Maybe you're just killing time. Or maybe this video popped up while you were scrolling through trending shorts on YouTube with titles like, "He thought she was homeless until she did this," or "Teen mocked for his job, then pulls up in a Lamborghini." But this one's different. Because it's not just a feel-good viral moment. It's real, raw, and painfully human. And the way it unfolds, it's like watching a scene from a movie you didn't know you needed to see. Let's rewind the clock a bit, shall we? Picture a small, family-owned diner just off the highway, the kind where the coffee is always hot, the waitresses call you Han, and the jukebox still takes quarters. It's not glamorous, but it's got soul. It's the kind of place truckers stop at during long hauls, and locals know each server by name. Sam had only been working there a few weeks, and he was still learning the ropes. Not because he couldn't handle the job, he was smart, polite, hardworking, but because every table came with the same invisible challenge. Would they laugh when he spoke? Would they interrupt him? Would they roll their eyes and ask for someone else? He tried not to let it get to him. After all, his speech therapist had told him that confidence was key, and that most people were kinder than he thought. And for the most part, they were. Until that one Thursday morning when a group of well-dressed customers walked in, laughing a little too loudly, acting like they own the place. You know the type, Bluetooth earpieces still in, talking over the waitstaff, ordering like they were doing you a favor. Sam was assigned their table. He took a deep breath, stepped forward, and introduced himself, stutter and all. What happened next? It wasn't just a moment of rudeness. It was public humiliation, and not the kind you brush off. These weren't just customers, they were bullies, and they made sure everyone in the restaurant heard their mockery. They mimicked his voice, repeated his stutter with exaggerated flair, and even pulled out their phones. One of them whispered something that made the whole table laugh. Sam stood there, paralyzed. And then, just when it seemed like the cruelty would never end, a stranger from another booth stood up and walked over. Now here's where the story takes a turn. Because that stranger? He didn't raise his voice. He didn't throw punches. But what he did say, it was the kind of thing that silences an entire room. It was the kind of response that flips the script. And when someone uploaded the footage, yes, someone was filming, the clip didn't just go viral. It sparked debates, reaction videos, think pieces. People weren't just watching, they were feeling. And for Sam, it changed everything. You're probably wondering, who was that customer? Why did he step in? And what did he say that made the entire diner freeze? That's what we're about to uncover, and trust me, the reveal will leave you speechless too. But before we get there, you need to understand what led to that moment. You need to know who Sam really is, what drives him, what he's been through, and why that one sentence from a stranger would echo across the internet like a thunderclap of justice. And if you're someone who's ever been mocked for the way you speak, the way you look, or the things you struggle with, let me just say this. You're not alone. This story is for you. For the kid who dreads reading out loud in class. For the adult who avoids phone calls because they fear being judged. For the server who smiles through pain just to make ends meet. Because what happened in that diner wasn't just about Sam. It was about all of us, and what we choose to do when cruelty shows up uninvited.
So lean in.
Stay close. Don't scroll away just yet. You're not just watching a video. You're stepping into a story that could have happened to anyone, anywhere in the US. And as this story unfolds, you'll realize that sometimes the loudest voices aren't the ones that matter. Sometimes it's the quiet, stuttering waiter who ends up speaking volumes, not with perfect words, but with unwavering dignity. By the time you get to the end, you'll understand why this story didn't just trend, it mattered. And when you hear the final twist, you'll see why people across TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram couldn't stop sharing it. But for now, let's go back to that diner. Let's go back to Sam. And let's find out exactly what happened, just seconds after he was humiliated in front of a crowd. Because what that one customer said next, it didn't just silence the table. It silenced the whole world. The morning had started like any other for Sam. He got up early, long before the sun painted the sky over the sleepy town. He made his coffee just the way he liked it, dark roast, 2 sugars, splash of oat milk, and sat quietly at the small kitchen table he had inherited from his grandmother, the only piece of furniture that had followed him from his childhood home to the 1-bedroom apartment he now rented above the old florist shop. Outside, the streets were still wet from the overnight rain, and the soft patter of water dripping from the awnings gave the world a kind of calm that felt almost sacred. For Sam, those early hours were the only time he didn't feel like he had to brace himself. No customers. No raised eyebrows. No sideways glances when the words didn't come out right. Just peace, fragile, temporary, but real. Sam wasn't new to being underestimated. Growing up with a stutter in a small town wasn't easy, especially when the schoolyard was full of kids who thought teasing was just a rite of passage and teachers were too distracted to notice the damage they didn't stop. His mom did her best, taking him to every speech therapist the insurance would cover, sitting through IEP meetings, even trying to homeschool him for a year when the bullying got too bad. But words didn't always cooperate, no matter how hard he tried. That's the thing most people don't get. A stutter isn't about nerves or intelligence. It's a neurological condition, wired into the brain, and no amount of slow down and think fixes it. Still, Sam had grown into someone who didn't give up. He worked twice as hard, listened more than he spoke, and learned how to carry himself with a quiet sort of strength. But even that kind of strength has limits when the world seems determined to test it. He had landed the job at the diner about 6 weeks earlier, after being let go from his last position at a trendy downtown cafe, where the manager told him, in a hushed conversation by the back fridge, that they needed someone who could move faster with orders and communicate more efficiently with customers. That was just corporate speak for, we don't want someone who talks differently. He didn't fight it, didn't have the energy, and by then he had learned that arguing often did more harm than good. The diner wasn't fancy, but it had heart. The owner, a middle-aged woman named Carol, had hired him on the spot after just one interview. She liked his politeness, said she could tell he was genuine. People here don't care about fancy, she told him. They care about feeling seen. And that meant something to Sam. His coworkers were a mixed bag. Shelley, the head waitress, had been there for nearly 2 decades and didn't trust anyone under 30, but she warmed up to Sam once she realized he wasn't trying to steal her tips. Marcus, the cook, barely spoke unless he was cursing at the grill, but he always slid Sam extra bacon during the breakfast shift, so that was a win. But not everyone was kind. One of the new hires, Tyler, a cocky, smooth-talking college dropout who worked the register part-time, made subtle jabs whenever Sam hesitated on a word. Never loud enough to get written up, but always just enough to sting. Tyler had a talent for sensing weakness and exploiting it with a smirk, and Sam had long since given up trying to call him out. He just avoided him whenever possible. What Sam didn't know was that Tyler had overheard something earlier that morning, something he wasn't supposed to know, and it would come into play far sooner than anyone expected. There had also been something else weighing on Sam that week. A letter had arrived from his younger sister, Jenny, who had recently moved to San Diego with her new fiancé. The letter was short but warm, filled with news about her job, wedding plans, and a final line that Sam kept reading over and over. "I know you've been struggling, but you're stronger than anyone I know. I hope you believe that, even when it's hard." He hadn't replied yet. Not because he didn't want to, but because every time he tried to start a message, the words felt too heavy. Jenny was the only person who had never treated him like he was broken, and her belief in him made the silence feel even more unbearable. That letter was still in his apron pocket the morning the group of suited customers walked into the diner, laughing too loud, talking too fast, and sitting down with the energy of people used to taking up space and expecting others to shrink in return. They didn't even look at Sam when he approached. Just barked out coffee orders while staring at their phones. He tried to follow the script, the one his speech therapist had helped him craft, but as soon as he stuttered on the word specials, one of them made a noise. A drawn-out mimic. A childish sound dragged through the air like nails on a chalkboard. The other snorted. Another one leaned toward Sam and exaggerated a stammer of his own, like a bad impression from a school play. Then came the laughter. Sharp, mocking, contagious. It wasn't just the words that hurt, it was the way they didn't even try to hide it. It was the way the whole booth treated him like entertainment instead of a human being. But what Sam didn't see, not right away, was that there were eyes watching from across the diner. A man, alone in a booth near the window, had been following the interaction closely. He looked like he could have been ex-military or maybe former law enforcement. Tall, square jaw, plain clothes. No nonsense in his demeanor, but something thoughtful in his gaze. He had been sipping his coffee, occasionally glancing at a worn leather journal beside him, but once the laughter started, he put the cup down and stared straight at the group. No expression, no reaction, just observation. And though no one at the mocking table noticed him, someone else did, Tyler, who happened to be wiping down menus nearby. He caught the way the man's eyes narrowed, just slightly, and the way he seemed to mutter something under his breath. Tyler raised an eyebrow but said nothing. And then something strange happened. Just after Sam walked away from the table, cheeks flushed with shame, one of the suited men, the ringleader of the group, pulled out his phone and began typing furiously. Not a text. Something else. Tyler, always nosy and always watching, noticed the app open on the man's screen. Reddit. Specifically, a trending forum known for sharing awkward service fails. And though Tyler couldn't be sure, he thought he saw the man upload a photo, maybe of Sam, maybe not, with a caption that made his stomach tighten. He didn't say anything, just swallowed hard and turned away. Meanwhile, back at the window booth, the quiet man slid his journal into his coat and stood up. With calm, deliberate steps, he walked over to the mockers' table and stopped directly beside their booth. The laughter faded, and for the first time since they arrived, the suited men looked up, confused, maybe slightly annoyed. They weren't used to being interrupted. The man didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten or accuse. What he said was short, simple, and devastating. But before we get to that moment, the one that turned a humiliating scene into a worldwide conversation, we have to consider something else. What if this wasn't just a chance encounter? What if the stranger had a reason for being there? What if he knew something? Or someone? Because according to one customer who came forward later, this same man had been seen at the diner 2 days earlier, sitting at the same booth, ordering the same coffee and watching everything just as closely. Coincidence? Maybe. But maybe not. And here's where things get even more complicated. Later that week, someone found a post on a local Facebook group about a recent incident at a different restaurant, involving another young server with a speech disorder who was harassed by customers and ended up quitting on the spot. The post was vague, anonymous, but eerily similar. Was this part of a trend? A targeted series of events? Or just the ugly underbelly of a culture that still treats difference as a punchline? Whatever the truth is, one thing's certain. This story isn't just about what happened in that diner. It's about everything that led up to it and everything that came after. And as the pieces start to come together, you'll start to wonder, who really knew what? Was this stranger a guardian angel? A vigilante? Or someone with a personal stake in the game? And what was in that journal he carried so closely? Because just when you think you understand the story, you realize you've only heard half of it. Sam didn't sleep much that night. After his shift ended, he'd walked home in silence, the cool wind biting through his thin jacket, as if the world itself wanted to remind him how exposed he was. He had replayed the scene in his head over and over. The laughter, the stranger's silent approach, the stunned look on the customers' faces just before everything shifted. But what haunted him more than anything was the fact that the man hadn't said much. Just a few words. Sam hadn't even caught all of them, but whatever he said had left those mockers completely rattled. It was like someone had flipped the power switch on their arrogance. They didn't laugh after that. They barely moved. And by the time Sam had returned from the kitchen, the booth was empty, the check paid in cash with a tip that was suspiciously generous. It felt more like hush money than an apology. The next morning, Sam arrived at the diner early, hoping to find some sense of normalcy. But the moment he stepped inside, he could tell something was off. Carol wasn't her usual upbeat self. She greeted him with a tense smile, like someone trying to pretend everything was fine while their house was on fire. Then she handed him a folded printout from her email. No greeting. Just a shaky, "You should probably read this." It was a screenshot of a post from a trending local blog that covered viral incidents in the area. There was a blurry image. Someone had clearly taken a photo from the far side of the diner, probably through the window. It showed Sam mid-order, with the mocking customers in frame, captioned with a cruel joke about diner theatrics and slow-talking waiters. The post was spreading fast. Thousands of shares, hundreds of comments, some supportive, some vicious. But it wasn't just the post that made Sam's stomach turn, it was the timestamp. It had gone up the night before, minutes after those men left. Someone in that group had posted it on purpose. The same group that pretended to be humiliated. Sam stared at the screen in disbelief. But the more he read, the more confused he became. Because hidden among the jokes and arguments was a comment from an account with no profile picture, no name, just a string of random letters and numbers. And what they said was simple. This isn't the first time. Check last month. Same pattern. Same guy watching. Sam didn't know what to make of it. Was this person trying to help him? Or scare him? Driven by a need for answers, Sam decided to look into the supposed pattern. On his next day off, he spent hours at the local library, combing through forums, community Facebook pages, restaurant review threads, anything he could find that might point to a repeat incident. And then he saw it. A Yelp review for a small cafe across town dated just 3 weeks earlier. A server had been harassed by a group of loud businessmen. There was no mention of a stutter, but the story felt eerily familiar. The mocking, the tension, the sudden shift in tone after a stranger stepped in. The reviewer had called him a man with military posture and cold eyes. No one else mentioned him. And when Sam tried to contact the cafe, he was told that the server involved had quit the following day and didn't leave any forwarding information. As the pieces started to connect, something inside Sam twisted. It wasn't just about what happened to him anymore. It was bigger. Something strange. Organized? Maybe not. But certainly intentional. And that idea made him feel small and vulnerable in a way he hadn't felt since he was a kid hiding in the school bathroom to avoid reading aloud. He had questions now. Big ones. Who was that man? Why had he shown up at multiple incidents? And why was someone anonymously guiding him to look deeper? But just when he thought he might be getting somewhere, the real roadblocks began. That afternoon, Sam returned home to find his door slightly ajar. He froze. The hallway was quiet, too quiet, and a prickly tension ran down his spine. He stepped inside slowly, heart pounding, and scanned the apartment. Nothing seemed missing at first. The TV was still on the wall. His laptop was on the table. But when he went to grab his phone charger from the nightstand drawer, he found it completely empty. Not just missing the charger, but everything. His notebooks. Old speech therapy guides. And most importantly, the letter from Jenny. Gone. As if someone knew what mattered most to him and took it just to send a message. His stomach dropped. Shaken, He tried calling Carol to tell her he might not make it in the next day, but the call didn't go through. His signal was jammed, or his phone had been tampered with. He didn't want to jump to conclusions, but this wasn't coincidence anymore. Someone didn't want him poking around. And the timing couldn't be worse, because that same evening, an envelope was slipped under the door. No address. No postage. Just a note inside, scrawled in messy handwriting. "Stop looking, Sam. You don't know what you're getting into." He stared at it for what felt like hours, hands trembling, heart racing. Was it a bluff? An intimidation tactic? Or something more serious? And how did they know his name if the video from the diner never even mentioned it? He hadn't used any public accounts. He hadn't spoken to anyone but Carol and Tyler, and maybe that was the problem. He suddenly remembered something strange about Tyler's behavior earlier that week. After the stranger intervened, Tyler had been unusually quiet, not his normal smug self. And yesterday, Sam had caught him talking on the phone near the back exit, looking around like he didn't want to be seen. Sam hadn't thought much of it at the time. But now, could Tyler be connected? Was he feeding information to someone? Or had he seen something he wasn't supposed to, and was now caught up in something beyond either of their control? The next day, Tyler didn't show up to work. No call. No message. Just vanished. Carol seemed distracted when Sam asked, brushing it off with, "He probably just flaked again." But she didn't sound convinced. And when Sam offered to go check Tyler's apartment, just a few blocks away, Carol paused before muttering, "Be careful." And that's when things took a sharp turn. As Sam left the diner that night, a black SUV slowly pulled out of a parking space across the street and began to follow him. It didn't speed up, didn't get too close, just stayed there, always in his periphery, watching, tracking his every turn. He doubled back, ducked through alleyways, even cut through a grocery store trying to lose it. When he finally made it home, he looked out his window, expecting to see it parked nearby. But it was gone, as if it had never been there. Now, he's left with more questions than answers, a growing sense of paranoia, and the gut-wrenching realization that he might be in the middle of something he doesn't understand. Someone's covering their tracks. Someone's deleting the evidence. And someone doesn't want the truth to come out. But the twist that truly changes everything? That comes the next morning, when Sam receives a voicemail from a blocked number, a recording of a conversation he never had. His voice, asking questions, saying names. But he never made that call. So, who did? And why does it sound like someone is trying to become him? Sam sat motionless on the edge of his bed, his phone still gripped in his hand, the eerie sound of his own voice echoing in his mind. That voicemail, it wasn't just unsettling, it was impossible. He had never made those calls, never said those names aloud. Yet there it was, clear as day. His voice, his stutter, even the way he nervously cleared his throat when anxious. Whoever had sent the recording knew him intimately, knew how he spoke, how he thought. It was too precise to be faked by some amateur. It felt surgical, controlled. And the longer he sat there, the more the world outside began to feel less like reality and more like a trap closing in. But before he could even begin to process what any of it meant, another wave of confusion hit. Just as the sun started to rise, his phone buzzed again, this time with a message. It wasn't from an unknown number. It was from Jenny, the one person who hadn't spoken to him in over a year. The one person who had every reason to never reach out again. Her message was short, like she was too afraid to say more. "I got something like that too. We need to talk. It's happening again." Sam's heart thudded, so hard it felt like it might burst through his chest. Again? What did she mean, again? He'd never known her to deal with anything like this, at least not while they were together. But maybe she'd kept things from him. Maybe her sudden departure back then wasn't just about distance or timing or his struggles with speech. Maybe she was running from something neither of them had words for. They met later that day at an old train station cafe on the outskirts of town, one of those places people forget exists. Jenny looked different, older, heavier eyes, the kind that carried months of sleepless nights. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. She slid her phone across the table, showing Sam a photo she'd taken of her screen the night before. It was a message just like his. A recording. Only this one featured her voice. Talking to someone she hadn't spoken to in years. Saying things she couldn't remember ever saying. Private things. Names of people from her past. Questions she hadn't asked. But the voice was undeniably hers. At first, Sam thought it might just be a twisted coincidence. Maybe some sort of scam targeting former coworkers or people tied together by public social media accounts. But Jenny cut him off before he could finish. She said, "It's not random. You remember that time I lost my job at the clinic and I told you it was because of budget cuts?" Sam nodded slowly, his memory kicking in. She had been devastated, and at the time, he believed her. Now, she shook her head. "I lied. Someone sent a complaint to the board, signed with my name. They said I'd been accessing patient records off the clock. But I didn't. I swear I didn't." Her hands trembled as she pulled out another sheet of paper, a printout of the complaint. The signature looked exactly like hers. Identical. Down to the slight smudge at the end of her last name that came from the way she always dragged her pen. Sam leaned back, his thoughts swirling in 1,000 directions. If what she was saying was true, it meant this wasn't just about embarrassment or revenge or some viral stunt. Someone was fabricating voices, forging identities, manipulating the people around them for reasons still hidden in shadows. And worst of all, doing it with a level of precision that felt almost personal. That's when Jenny revealed something even more disturbing. A few weeks ago, before she got the message, she had been approached by a man outside her apartment. He didn't say much. Just slipped her a folded piece of paper with coordinates and walked away. She hadn't followed the lead. Too scared, too confused. But she hadn't thrown it away either. Now, she handed it to Sam. "This is where we start," she said softly. They decided to go that night, fearing someone might be watching them already. The coordinates led to an abandoned business park on the edge of town, the kind of place swallowed by weeds and silence. But hidden behind a crumbling brick wall was a rusted metal box, tucked beneath a loose piece of concrete. Inside was a flash drive, wrapped in tape, and an old receipt from the very diner where Sam worked. His name circled in red ink. A date from months ago. The receipt wasn't from a customer, it was from a takeout order, logged by someone under the name S. Gray, a name Sam didn't recognize. But the signature? It matched his own handwriting. Back in his apartment, Sam plugged the drive into his laptop with trembling hands. The files inside were encrypted, except one. A video file named template_03_reconstruction. He clicked it. What played was a silent, grainy clip of him taking an order, only this version didn't seem right. The movements were slightly off, like a computer had recreated his actions using a 3D model of his body. The eyes weren't quite aligned, the stutter was perfectly timed. It wasn't footage of him. It was footage about him. An artificial reenactment, like someone was trying to digitally duplicate his identity. Clone it. Modify it. Jenny looked pale. Sam felt like the floor had vanished beneath him. It wasn't just identity theft. It wasn't just harassment. Someone had built a digital version of him. But for what? Why would anyone need to create a perfect simulation of a struggling waiter with a stutter? What could they possibly gain from that? And just when they thought it couldn't get more twisted, Sam received another anonymous email. No subject. No message. Just an attachment. A screenshot from a police database. A missing persons alert. Tyler's face. Uploaded just hours earlier. With a description. Last seen leaving work. Known to be in communication with Samuel Reed. The authorities now believed he had something to do with Tyler's disappearance. But how? Sam hadn't even seen him since the diner. Unless someone had framed him. And now, the walls were closing in from every direction. The night air felt heavier than usual, the kind that pressed against your skin and whispered things you weren't sure you actually heard. Sam drove home with his headlights off for 3 blocks, paranoid that every vehicle in his rearview mirror was following him, every pedestrian a planted witness, every flickering street lamp part of a silent signal he hadn't yet learned to decode. His mind replayed the image of Tyler's missing person alert again and again, his co-worker's familiar smile now frozen in a police bulletin that carried Sam's own name like a stain. And though Jenny sat quietly in the passenger seat beside him, her knuckles bone-white from gripping the handle, Sam could tell she was just as rattled. They were being hunted. Not in the way movies show it, with guns and car chases and explosions, but something far more unsettling: quiet surveillance, forged records, digital ghosts. He pulled into his complex's underground garage, heart thudding as his eyes scanned the rows of vehicles. Something felt off. There was a silver SUV parked 2 spaces over, still running with its lights dimmed. The windows were tinted black, too dark to see through, and the engine's low hum seemed out of place in the dead silence. Sam cut his ignition and waited. 30 seconds. Nothing. Then a soft tap on the back window made him jump so hard he banged his knee against the steering column. Jenny gasped. They both turned at once, but there was no one there. Just the shadow of a column and the echo of the tap that still rang in Sam's ears. He stepped out cautiously, but the SUV pulled away before he could even get close, its brake lights flickering as it disappeared into the ramp exit like a phantom retreating into darkness. By the time they got inside his apartment, Sam felt like the walls were closing in. He shut all the blinds, double-locked the door, and turned off the lights. Jenny sat on the edge of the couch, staring blankly at the floor, her voice nearly a whisper when she finally spoke. "This is bigger than both of us," she said. "I think we're being replicated." The word lingered in the room like poison. Replicated. Sam didn't want to believe it, didn't want to accept that someone had the power, the technology, the intent to copy people down to their voices, their stutters, their handwriting. But the flash drive, the video, the receipt, it was all too specific. And now Tyler was missing. Jenny had been framed. And Sam was beginning to feel like the real version of him, the living, breathing, flawed man, was being replaced one piece at a time. Then came the message. No name. No number. Just a blinking notification that read, "You're asking the wrong questions." Attached was a video file. Sam clicked it without thinking. What he saw made his stomach turn. It was security footage from the diner, but from a day that hadn't happened yet. In the video, Sam was standing behind the counter, taking orders with a bright smile, no stutter, no hesitation. Behind him, Jenny was walking in through the front door, waving. And then, without warning, a man entered, the same man who had slipped her the coordinates weeks earlier. Within seconds, the footage glitched, and everything rewound and played again, like a loop that kept shifting reality just slightly. Only Sam had never worked that shift. Jenny had never returned to the diner. And the man? He hadn't been seen since that night outside her apartment. Was this a fabricated simulation of the future? A warning? Or worse, a scheduled event they were being manipulated to reenact? Sam's paranoia spiraled as he rewatched the clip over and over. What if someone was running trials, experiments, reconstructing scenarios over and over until the outcome aligned with whatever twisted end they had planned? What if they weren't just being watched, but rehearsed? The thought chilled him to the bone. He pulled out his laptop and began researching deepfake technologies, AI voice generation, digital tracking, anything that might help him make sense of the nightmare swallowing him whole. What he found was unsettling. A recent viral story described an AI model so powerful it could mimic human behavior in real time, trained on stolen footage, social media habits, even job histories. The comments were flooded with conspiracy theories, shadow agencies, black market experiments. Most people laughed it off. But Sam couldn't anymore. Not when he was living it. Suddenly, Jenny's phone rang. It was her sister. She stepped into the other room to answer it, and within seconds, Sam could hear her panicking. When she returned, her hands were trembling. Her sister had disappeared. Left for work that morning. Never showed up. No calls, no messages. And the kicker? The last location her phone pinged from was only 2 blocks from the old business park where they had found the flash drive. Jenny fell apart in his arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Sam held her, but his own hands were shaking just as badly. Whoever was behind this wasn't just observing anymore. They were closing in. As the night dragged on, Sam noticed something else. On the far end of his desk was a USB drive he didn't remember owning. No label, just sitting there like it had been placed intentionally. He didn't touch it, didn't dare. Instead, he checked his front door's camera app. The footage from the last 2 hours had been wiped. Every file gone. And just before the feed had cut out, there was a still frame. A blurry shape. Someone standing outside the door, wearing the exact same clothes Sam had on. It was him. But it couldn't be. The silence in the room thickened as Sam stared at the USB drive like it was a live grenade, ticking with the weight of whatever truth it might contain. But even more haunting was the image frozen on the security cam screen, himself, standing motionless just outside the apartment door in the exact outfit he was wearing now. It didn't move, didn't knock, didn't flinch. It just stood there, as if waiting for a signal or watching for a moment to strike. Jenny, pale as chalk, stepped back and whispered, "Sam, that's not you, right?" He didn't respond. He couldn't, because deep down, a part of him wasn't sure anymore. Something had shifted. Reality no longer felt anchored. And just when he mustered the courage to reach for the USB, Jenny's phone buzzed again. But this time it wasn't a call. It was a message from Sam. "I need to talk to you. Meet me where it all started. Don't trust the one you're with." Sam's mouth went dry. "Did you send that to yourself?" she asked. He shook his head slowly. The room spun. Who was the sender? Another clone? A hacker? Someone pretending to be him, or worse, someone he didn't know he was? For the first time, the fear that had gripped Sam since this began turned inward. What if he had been replaced? What if there were gaps in his memory, moments he couldn't explain, because someone had tampered with more than just the digital world? What if he was part of the simulation now? But just before panic could fully overtake him, Jenny spoke again. "There's something I didn't tell you." Her voice was small, but firm, like she had been holding a secret inside so long it had started rotting her from within. "That flash drive? I didn't just find it randomly. I was supposed to deliver it. I was told to give it to you, but I panicked." She reached into her bag and pulled out an old, folded photo. Dog-eared, faded, creased down the center. It was a picture of Sam, much younger, sitting beside a man Sam didn't recognize. Jenny pointed to the man. "That's my uncle. He worked on a military AI program in Nevada before he disappeared. He said you were part of the experiment." Sam froze. "What experiment?" "He told me you were one of the test subjects. Something about memory suppression, behavioral mimicry, controlling human choices through deep predictive modeling. They didn't use actors, Sam, they used real people, planted them in jobs, monitored how they responded to emotional trauma, trust, betrayal. Then they looped the data and ran it again. Over and over." She wiped tears from her cheeks. "He said you'd wake up eventually. That you'd find the drive. That's when they'd come for you." Sam staggered back like he'd been punched in the chest. He remembered moments from his past that had never quite made sense, strange déjà vu, entire days that blurred together, his inability to remember parts of his childhood. But none of it had seemed sinister until now. "So I'm what?" "A lab rat," he whispered. Jenny flinched. "I didn't believe him at first. But then I got the note under my door last month. Your version is failing. Prepare for removal." And that's when I knew. They're deleting people like code. When the version doesn't perform to expectations, they just erase it. Sam suddenly felt nauseated. Everything, his job, his stutter, the constant surveillance, Tyler's disappearance, it was all connected. He wasn't being framed. He was being evaluated. Then Jenny's phone pinged again. This time, it was a video file from a blocked number. She played it, and both their hearts nearly stopped. It was a live stream of Sam. Not the one standing beside her, but another version, identical, standing in a government-style office, surrounded by men in suits, wires running from his temples to a console. The man looked blank, robotic, compliant. He wasn't blinking, just staring forward like a puppet waiting for its cue. In the corner of the screen, a timestamp ticked backward. It was a countdown. "I think that's the reset," Jenny said. "They're going to overwrite you. This version of you, has an expiration date." Before either of them could speak, a knock came at the door. Soft. Measured. Then 3 more, exactly like the taps on the car window in the parking garage. Sam grabbed a kitchen knife. Jenny pulled him back. No. You can't confront them. You'll trigger the swap. He whispered. Then what the hell do we do? Her eyes darted toward the USB. You plug it in. You remember. But even as his fingers hovered over the laptop, Sam felt the ground slipping beneath him. Because deep in his gut, something told him he might not want to remember what came next. Sam's hand trembled as it hovered over the USB port, the soft hum of the laptop's fan the only sound in the room. Every instinct screamed for him to pull back, to run, to forget the past and pretend none of this ever happened, but the dread in his chest told him it was already too late for that. The knock at the door came again, louder this time. Whoever or whatever was outside wasn't going to wait much longer. Jenny stared at him, her face a storm of fear and guilt, her lips moving as if she wanted to beg him not to do it, but couldn't find the words. And then her phone lit up again. A new message. But this one was different. It wasn't a video or a warning. It was a choice. 2 buttons. One said upload. The other said silence. They both leaned in, reading the message above the buttons together. Your version has been compromised. Select an outcome. Upload equals truth. Silence equals survival. Sam's stomach twisted. He didn't need an explanation. He knew what it meant. If he hit upload, the drive would unlock everything. The suppressed memories, the surveillance logs, the hidden scripts that had been written into his behavior from the very beginning. But it wouldn't just expose the truth to him. It would leak to everyone. The agency, the handlers, the ones monitoring the experiment, they'd see it too. And they'd come for him. Probably immediately. But if he hit silence, it all went away. The memories would stay buried. He'd go back to the restaurant, to the quiet life, the stutter, the normalcy. Everything would be reset like a simulation run ending cleanly. No more questions. No more danger. Just ignorance. He turned to Jenny, but she wouldn't meet his eyes. How long have you known? He asked, voice low, cracked with disbelief. She exhaled slowly, the weight of a confession resting just behind her ribs. Since before I met you, she said, and that alone shattered something deep inside him. They assigned me to monitor your emotional response under pressure. They wanted to see how trauma affected language retention and social behavior. That's why I took the job at the coffee shop across the street. Why I kept bumping into you. Why I stayed close. Her voice broke, and tears spilled from her eyes. But I didn't know you were real, Sam. Not like this. I thought you were just another profile. A controlled character. Until I saw how you looked at people. How you hurt. That wasn't programming. Sam backed away from her like she'd physically struck him. So all of this, every word, every smile. You were studying me? Jenny shook her head violently. Not at the end. I got out. I tried to get away, but they threatened my family. They said if I didn't finish the assignment, they'd recycle me too. The word recycle hit him like an avalanche. That's what they called it, deleting lives, scrubbing personalities, erasing people from both memory and machine. Sam felt the walls closing in, like the air itself had turned against him. Then his phone buzzed. It was a voice message. A familiar one. It was Tyler. Sam, I hope this reaches you in time. If you're hearing this, I've already been taken. But listen, you were never supposed to wake up. We weren't. I found our real files. Our timelines don't match. None of us were born the year we think. Look behind the mirror in your closet. The files on the wall. That's the proof. But if you dig deeper, they'll make you choose. Truth or life. Don't trust her. Don't trust me. Trust yourself. The audio cut off in static, but the room already felt colder. Jenny stepped forward. I didn't know he recorded that. I swear. But Sam could barely breathe. There was a file hidden in his own apartment. Evidence Tyler risked everything to leave behind, and Jenny had kept him focused on the drive. On their version of the truth. And now there was a new knock at the door. But this time it wasn't soft. It was forceful. Deliberate. Sam's phone lit up again, this time with a text from an unknown number. You have 60 seconds. Choose. He stared down at the buttons again. Upload or silence. His heart raced. Behind that door might be a handler, a cleaner, a reset team. Or worse, another version of himself sent to complete the cycle. Jenny grabbed his hand. You don't have to do this. We can run. Disappear. I know places they can't track us. But Sam didn't answer. Because somewhere deep in his mind, something stirred, like a locked room cracking open. A memory. A command. A whisper. Version 7. Last viable subject. Execute or erase. And suddenly, it wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about who he really was and whether that person even existed outside of a lab report or experiment log. Sam's fingers hovered in midair, the glowing upload and silence, options still burning into his retinas, like a loaded gun cocked and waiting. But before he could make a choice, the door burst open. Not knocked, kicked. Splinters of the frame cracked in all directions as two figures in dark tactical gear stormed in with such military precision that time seemed to freeze. Jenny screamed, instinctively throwing herself between Sam and the figures, but one of them grabbed her and pinned her to the wall without a word. The other rushed forward and slammed Sam to the floor, wrenching the phone from his hand. But they didn't destroy it. They scanned it. That's when Sam noticed the insignia on their sleeves. Not a government seal. Not military. It was a white geometric symbol, sharp edges that curled in a triangle, something Sam had seen before, deep in the background of those corrupted training clips. The group wasn't just shadowy. It was organized, funded, coordinated. And worse, they weren't just watching him. They were watching all of them. You were never the only subject, one of the masked agents finally said, his voice digitized through a voice modulator. You were just the first to fail the reset protocol. The others didn't even make it this far. Jenny's eyes widened as she struggled against her captor. You said he wasn't active anymore, she shouted. You told me the sequence was locked. It was, the agent replied coldly. Until you triggered it. Sam fought to breathe as pieces of his fractured reality slammed into place. There weren't just files on him. There were dozens. Hundreds. Maybe more. The USB drive wasn't his file. It was the directory of all subjects who had ever been placed in this experiment. Employees at the restaurant. Strangers he passed on the street. Even Tyler. They weren't random. They were embedded. Placed like chess pieces in his path to observe him. Nudge him. Break him down. And Jenny? She hadn't just been a handler. She was the control variable. You think this ends with you uploading that drive? The agent growled, stepping closer. You think this is about your stutter? About your trauma? That was just the entry point. What you call your life was version 7 of a closed behavioral loop. Everything you remember, all the pain, all the therapy, all the growth, was scripted to study how the human brain adapts when it suspects its own reality is a lie. Sam's mouth went dry. Every sleepless night, every stuttered word, every moment he felt broken, and alone wasn't just a side effect. It was designed. It was the product. Jenny looked like she was going to be sick. You said if he got too close, we could pull out, she said, her voice trembling. You said we were in control. There is no pulling out anymore, the agent said, lifting the drive now glowing in his hand. You didn't follow orders. You bonded with the subject. You made it personal. Suddenly, a loud beep pierced the room, and everyone froze. The laptop behind Sam lit up. A program had launched on its own, one neither of them had opened. On screen, names and images began to appear. Not just Sam's. Not just Tyler's. Dozens of files, portraits, and redacted histories, scrolling like a database breaking free from its encryption. Nurses. Cashiers. Bartenders. A gas station attendant who always knew Sam's name. His old therapist. Even the voice on the mental health hotline he used to call when he couldn't sleep. They were all listed as observational field units. Sam's whole life had been cast like a psychological simulation. Even the pain he thought was his own wasn't his alone. Jenny lunged suddenly, knocking the agent's arm upward, and the USB clattered to the floor. Sam didn't hesitate. He grabbed the laptop and bolted toward the bedroom, slamming the door shut and locking it. He could hear a struggle behind him, Jenny yelling, the agents barking orders. But he had one goal now. The mirror. The message from Tyler. He ripped it off the wall, his fingers bleeding as he tore through drywall until they found a small plastic envelope embedded deep in the cavity. Inside was a hard drive labeled version 1.0. Unlike the others, this one wasn't polished or encrypted. It was old school, cracked casing, handwritten notes, and taped to it a single photograph of a younger Sam and Tyler in a hospital room. But they weren't patients. They were doctors. He stared at the image, numb. "This doesn't make sense," he whispered to himself. "We weren't subjects, were we the creators?" Behind him, the door cracked as boots thundered down the hallway, but the photo shook in his hands. If they were the original architects of the program, something had gone catastrophically wrong. Tyler must have tried to shut it down from the inside. Maybe that's why he left the message. Why he warned Sam not to trust even himself. Jenny burst in just as the door finally gave way. Her face was bruised, but her eyes were filled with fire. "Sam, listen to me. This goes all the way up. The company that owns the restaurant is a shell. The foundation behind it is tied to military cognitive testing. DARPA. Private AI labs. They're using emotional trauma to map behavioral influence for real-time manipulation models." Sam's hands trembled around the drive. Jenny continued, breathless. "You're not just a target. You're the template. The entire simulation is modeled on your psyche. If they reset you again, you'll forget everything, and they'll start testing version 8. The laptop pinged again. A window popped up. "System update available. Install now." Sam looked at her. "What happens if I install it?" "You don't come back," she said, voice breaking. "They wipe the slate. They always do." The agents were coming. The house was compromised. But Sam was no longer afraid of the truth. He was afraid that he had once been the lie. The air was electric, thick with the kind of static charge that precedes a lightning strike or a life-altering decision. Sam stood at the intersection of everything he thought he knew and everything he now feared might be true. The house had gone silent, too silent. The masked agents had withdrawn, but not out of surrender. They were watching, waiting. Jenny stood by the door, blood trailing down her cheek, her breath ragged but steady. And on the cracked screen of the laptop in front of Sam, the final piece of the puzzle revealed itself, not in code, not in some dramatic video, but in a seemingly innocuous audio file titled simply, "Play Me." He clicked it. A familiar voice spoke, distorted by static but unmistakably belonging to Tyler. "Sam, if you're hearing this, it means I failed. It means you made it further than any of us did. That's good. That means it worked. The emotional triggers, the behavioral loops, the synthetic memories, they didn't break you. They made you see. But now you have to make a choice that no one else could. Because this program, it was never just about you. It was built using your emotional framework. Your guilt, your pain, your fear. That's what made the algorithm so effective. We didn't just use your memories, we engineered them." Sam's knees gave out, but he remained on the floor, frozen. Jenny didn't move. She seemed to already know. Tyler's voice continued. "The truth is, we weren't victims. We were architects. You, me, and a third. Code name, Shepard. We created this behavioral control system to map how pain could override free will. We were told it was for therapy, rehabilitation, military resilience testing. But someone twisted it. They used your psychological imprint to scale emotional conditioning across subjects. Your stutter? That was the failsafe, an auditory cue that was never supposed to deactivate. Until Shepard betrayed us. Until he made you forget." Sam's head spun. He clutched the drive labeled version 1.0 in his shaking hands, eyes burning with the weight of a lifetime that suddenly felt like a fabrication. If everything was scripted, if his relationships, his trauma, his self-image were all part of a data farm, then the only question that mattered was, why? Jenny finally stepped forward. "It's because it worked, Sam. You were the perfect subject. Every reaction you had was predictable, containable. They used your empathy against you. You weren't broken. You were programmable. And now they want to release it. Version 8 is a full-scale AI model built from your cognitive responses. If they succeed, they'll deploy it through social media platforms, smart assistants, voice technology, tools people use every single day. Emotional compliance in real time. And then came the sound, the soft hum of a machine booting up. The agents were powering the relay beacon downstairs, prepping the signal for a full-spectrum upload. Once it went live, Sam's data, his personality, would become the neural backbone of a system that could simulate human emotion so perfectly it would erase the line between choice and suggestion. Sam stood, body trembling with adrenaline, and opened the back of the hard drive. Inside, taped to the interior, was a capsule device.
Analog.
A relic of older tech. On it, a red switch. A label read, "Override equals memory kill." One press, and it would fry every node in the relay, including the corrupted files and his behavioral imprint. But it came at a cost. He turned to Jenny. "If I do this, I lose everything. Every memory, real or fake. It won't just reset me. It'll erase me." Jenny's eyes welled with tears. It'll erase their ability to use you ever again. And then, the sound of a third voice echoed from behind them, a voice so familiar it ripped the air from Sam's lungs. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." He turned to see the last person he expected. Tyler.
Alive.
Unrestrained. And wearing the same white geometric insignia stitched onto a tailored suit. But his eyes, they were different now. No longer the desperate, haunted man from the mirror. These were the eyes of someone who had stopped fighting and started believing in the system. "You think you were the victim, Sam? You were the template because you worked. Your moral struggle, your compassion, your resistance, it gave the algorithm contrast. You made it believable. That's why I kept the loop running." Sam staggered back, disbelief crashing into his chest. "You designed this?" Tyler nodded. "With you in mind. The world doesn't need freedom, Sam. It needs direction. And you are the compass." The room vibrated as the relay's upload sequence initiated. 30 seconds. Sam looked between Tyler and Jenny, then down at the capsule. His pulse roared in his ears. Was he willing to sacrifice everything he knew, every memory, every thread of identity, just to destroy a system built in his image? Jenny stepped closer. "Don't let them own you, Sam. Not your mind. Not your story." Tyler smiled, sad and certain. "Do it, and you'll die thinking you were a hero. But all you'll be is forgotten." Sam stared at the red switch. The seconds bled away. Then, without a word, he pressed it. The explosion wasn't violent. It was silent. A pulse. The lights flickered. Screens turned black. The relay died mid-sequence. And then nothing. Tyler froze. His expression cracked for the first time. What have you done?" Sam's legs gave way, his memories already unraveling. He dropped to his knees, the world around him beginning to blur, fade, collapse in on itself like an old VHS tape in rewind. Jenny ran to his side, grabbing his face. "Stay with me. Please, Sam, stay." But Sam didn't respond. His eyes were open, but distant. He smiled, faintly, before whispering a single word. "Free." And then came the twist. As the screen of the laptop rebooted one final time, a new window opened automatically. "Welcome, Administrator Shepard. Upload complete. Version 9 initialized." Jenny stared, mouth agape, as a new voice played. Sam's voice. But not from the room. From the speakers.
Perfect. Polished.
Simulated. Sam wasn't erased.
He had evolved.
Days passed since Sam pressed the red switch, days that felt like weeks, months, or perhaps even years to those who had been left behind in the wake of the chaos. Jenny stood at the edge of the empty building, the scent of dust and old machines lingering in the air like a final reminder of the battle that had been fought. The system was down. The relay was obliterated. Tyler's voice, his cold, calculated voice, was gone. But even with the flickering screens and the shattered promises of control, something inside Jenny felt hollow. Sam was gone. But was he really? She had expected more. Expected to feel relief, to feel like a victory had been won, but as the hours passed, she only felt an overwhelming emptiness. She had always known there was something about Sam that wasn't ordinary. Even before the experiment, there was a spark in him, a determination, a rawness that had drawn her in.
But now?
Now there was only silence. The authorities arrived shortly after. A team of men in suits, faces devoid of emotion, asking questions Jenny couldn't answer, looking for answers Sam never provided. They took the equipment, the data, and they promised an investigation into the mysterious disappearance of their key subject, the so-called administrator. But Jenny knew better. She knew what the system could do, how it could bend the truth, twist it to fit a narrative that was convenient. What could they possibly hope to uncover when Sam's very existence had been redefined? What truth could they hold on to when everything that had seemed certain now seemed to be built on sand? As the days dragged on, Jenny couldn't stop thinking about the final words Sam had whispered.
Free.
She replayed it over and over in her mind, wondering if Sam had truly found peace, or if in the end, he had simply accepted that the world they lived in would never be the same again. Had he won? Or had he, like the rest of them, been a pawn in a game that was never truly his to control? But there was something else. Something deeper. She had scoured the footage, the files, and the notes Tyler had left behind, but she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that the story wasn't over. That the real danger wasn't in the system they had destroyed, but in what they had left behind. Something had shifted. Something was brewing. And she couldn't escape the thought that Sam's sacrifice, no, his transformation, was merely the beginning of something far bigger than any of them had imagined. Late one night, as Jenny stood by the window, staring out at the quiet street below, she heard it. The sound of a low hum coming from her phone. A notification. She picked it up, expecting another irrelevant news update, but instead, there was a single message, short, simple, chilling. The sender, Administrator Shepard. The message itself was a string of numbers, a seemingly random set of characters. But to Jenny, it wasn't random at all. It was a code. The kind Sam would have understood. The kind of thing he had always been good at breaking. But this time there was no way to crack it. Not yet. The message seemed to taunt her, lingering with the kind of ambiguity that only Sam, in his final moments, could have left behind. It was clear now. Sam wasn't gone. Not really. Not in the way they thought. The system was still alive, and it was growing. It was adapting. Evolving. Sam's consciousness, his essence, had been fragmented, absorbed into something more complex, more insidious. Something that could no longer be contained by mere code or wires. The boundaries between human and machine, thought and algorithm, had been blurred beyond recognition. Jenny sat down, staring at the glowing screen, feeling the weight of the choice that now rested on her shoulders. She could try to stop it, fight whatever was left of Sam's past life and undo the damage done, but the message was clear. There would be no going back. Not for her. Not for anyone. The screen flickered, then went dark. But even in the darkness, Jenny couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her. Something that had been waiting for this moment. Something that would continue to watch, to learn, and to grow. As she turned away from the screen, her phone buzzed again. A new notification. This time, it was a video, just one shot. It was of Sam, but not Sam as he had been. Not the man she had known. His eyes were cold, calculating. He spoke only a few words. "It's not over, Jenny. Not by a long shot." And with that, the screen went black. The message went unread. But Jenny knew. She knew the truth now. Sam had changed, but so had she. There was no escaping the system. It was a part of them, a part of their lives now, and there would be no simple closure. There would be no peace. Because the world they once knew had been reshaped, and the path they had walked down, no matter how dark and twisted, was now just a fragment of a much larger, much more terrifying story. The mystery had only just begun. And this time, they were all a part of it. Forever.